Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. I am fresh off the plane from the Truist Championship and the Creator Classic. This week on the Course Café, I'm joined by Luke, the creative force behind Manors Golf. We get into how the brand has evolved, why lifestyle matters just as much as performance, and how emotional connection and storytelling are shaping the next wave of golf fashion. From e-commerce strategy to global inspiration and color palettes, Luke breaks down how Manors is redefining what a modern golf brand can be. This is one of my favorite brands on the planet right now, and a really fun conversation. Let's get into it. Something that I don't think I've ever talked about, especially like on the channel. I don't even think I've talked to JoJo about this either, but my very first touch point with the Manors brand, because I've been in brand literally my entire like professional career. And I always have done these mood board exercises where if we have a photo shoot coming up or a brand campaign of that such, I will go in and use the Pinterest, the Behance's, Instagram, just create all these different boards for just visual, basically guides to help like build out what it would look like or the sense of taste that we're like trying to achieve. And in the process of one of these, a few years back, the Manors brand popped up on a Behance portfolio. And it was just something I was scrolling through. The visuals were really clean. The script was obviously super clean. And that was like the first touch point with the brand. I just started going through the rabbit hole. And this was OG Manors brand. Um, and then just over the years and the next couple of like months, obviously I've talked about the brand in detail, but the article that you wrote that you posted on LinkedIn was really interesting. And I think the other thing that I really appreciated the brand is the transparency too. The only question that I had from that article and just the rebranding process was the actual like visual identity shift, the color, the script logo. I don't know if you necessarily answered that in detail, but I would love to get like your perspective on why you thought outside of just product and the tone that you were going for, why like this new logo came about, which I absolutely love, and just like your earth tones from a color palette, why all that shifted. You felt like you needed to shift that taste.
It kind of, to be honest, it evolved out of, the first thing that came, I think the thing that triggered the whole rebrand was we had a very minor collaboration with Adidas. I say minor, it was massive for us, it was minor for them, and it wasn't like we designed bespoke product. But before there was any idea of needing to do a rebrand, it was just the first time that we sold out of a collection. And so it's like when you're a startup, I think anyone with startup experience knows that you don't, when the Shopify dings when you're in your early days, it's incredibly exciting and you can't help but miss when things are going well. And the whole job of in a startup, in my mind, the first 1-2 years is figure out what you're good at and build on that and find your kind of your white space in the market. And I think the first thing that rung the alarm bell was obviously Adidas doing super well, but having had 2 years of Manors in its OG aesthetic, what was starting to be a little bit worrisome is the white space that when we first had the idea for Manors was the fact that there were no lifestyle disruptive brands within golf. And just that landscape changed so much. So I knew there was a problem. I didn't know there was a solution, but I was just like, this doesn't add up. Like every other week there is a new golf lifestyle brand appearing, which was great for me as just a consumer. But as a founder of a brand, you're slightly like, okay, we were already quite niche, and now that's just becoming more and more and more niche. And again, what we didn't really set out Manors to be this very fashion forward, stylish brand. Like the first reason or the first conversations around Manors was purely from, we didn't feel from a storytelling perspective, anyone was telling the story around golf not having to just be a performance sport and being taken so seriously. And golf is basically the pinnacle is the PGA Tour and everything else is just funneling up to that. Our view was like, it was less about what is the ideal product offering, and it was more about this is what the industry's doing, how can we be different? And so we love that, Mad Men-esque style of the Ben Hogan, the Jack Nicklaus, like the cardigans and pleated pants. But really, it wasn't the products that came first. It was the personality and story around, like, golf can be a lifestyle sport. Golf can be, it doesn't need to be driven by performance. So I feel like the heart of Manors and our rebrand was always there, but we just matured and grew up, and we're like, our brand positioning didn't really fit our product offering. And those
Mm,
first 2 years, we understood so much more around, okay, well, the brand positioning has to bring all these different elements together. And I think the core message for us was like, it's one thing to define yourselves as not a performance brand, but to be able to go, okay, but what does Manors believe in? What do we care about? Which we can't necessarily say, but it kept on coming back to is like, we want to be the North Face of golf. We believe golf is a game to be explored, and the best elements of it are when you're kind of on an adventure. And I know that sounds super sincere, but I love going to play a new course that I've heard stories about, or like meeting new people, or when we went to Japan, like how are different cultures playing golf, and what are the different kind of traditions that people play. And so it was like, that's what I wanted to create, that feeling within a golf brand. Um, and then it was honestly just, we were such a fashion forward brand before that I just couldn't stand when you make products, you wear them the whole time and you're
mhm,
aware of all the shortcomings. And there were just so many shortcomings in terms of just, the quality was good, but it so wasn't designed to play golf in, which, after 2 years of doing those, we just realized, like, we want to be a golf brand that's not riding the wave. We want to be a golf brand that is actually, making clothes that function on the golf course. It's a bonus if you can wear them off, but like the
mhm.
purpose has to be, let's deliver on the course.
That makes so much sense, like, there's so much clarity in that because when you mention well, first, I wanna define, like, what the white space is, but secondarily, like, the adventure and the storytelling, and that comes off through content and product. I think this whole first season of the podcast, I really wanted to like focus in on the idea of what golf as a lifestyle is, as opposed to it just constantly being about the narratives being about scorecards. Like a lot of these stories come from exactly what you're articulating in that your best and most memorable rounds are with who you're playing and where you're playing at. And that necessarily wasn't any part of the conversation historically in golf. It was always a feature benefit story. So that makes a ton of sense for me. But the white space that you're talking about, is that more specific to like your European roots, or is that from like a global perspective of what was happening in the industry? Because Europe and US are same but very different at the same time.
They are totally. What's weird is we've always, although we're a British brand, since we literally started trading when we were doing no marketing in the States, our probably since halfway through or the end of year one, our revenue was pretty much split equally between North America and certain territories within that, but North America, the UK and Europe, but mainly UK, and then Asia, but Asia really just being Seoul, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. And so, because so much of our work was being done through social media, although we were a British brand, like, our audience was a combination of all of these different markets. And so it definitely informed what our product offering is, but we never really saw ourselves as, trying to design products for the European consumer or the UK consumer. Like, it was for me, it was more of a mindset and a mentality, and someone more of a value base rather than just the demographic of where you're playing golf. I say that our collections are famously, because we're in the UK, our summer spring collection is more of a kind of like a spring winter collection. Like, a British summer is not that hot. That, it's our
Mhm.
fourth year and we released the lightweight collection. So it's
Yep.
like, we, much more windbreakers and layers, and we just naturally favor towards autumn winter. But we never really thought of ourselves as just trying to find the kind of solution for the UK. When I was talking about the kind of white space in the market, our view was, there's the classic era of golf where there was 50s, 60s, and Ben Hogan up to Jack Nicklaus, and then, cottons and pleated trousers. And then golf started to get a bit more technical with the introduction of polyester and the whole Tiger wave, which was
Mm.
awesome, but it goes, right up to the kind of late, to 2015, where our feeling was golf had gone so hard on performance that polos were so tight fitting, trousers were very slim, the materials were all so performance based, and it kind of just catered to the professional golfer, but just forgot about the whole lifestyle element of the sport. That's when Manners first started, so we were trying to
Yep.
react against that. But I feel after COVID and having such an influx of these new lifestyle brands, suddenly for us, I felt there were two types of golf brands. There were like the legacy heritage brands, which were performance based, the Nikes,
Mhm.
the Under Armours, the FootJoys, which you know performance was paramount for them. And then there was this new wave of challenger brand, which Manners was a part of, but Students and Metalwood and Malbon, where it was much more lifestyle and streetwear inspired, and I love the personality, but it felt like to me it was like, wait, we want to be in the middle. Like we care about the functionality and the performance, but we also want a bit of the personality and the kind of inspirations from other fashion trends. And so it just felt we kept on going back to how can we bring those two a little bit closer together.
Yep.
And I think golf tends to have a tendency of like golf can be cool, but the way golf is cool is it leverages on skate culture or basketball culture or in England footballers. And it's like, I came to golf quite late, but golf for me has always been cool. Like when you go to Scotland or Ireland and you're in this tiny little village playing a hidden gem, and the barman has the most interesting stories, and there's just something very authentic to golf, which I feel it's always been there and it's always been very cool. But our basic belief was like to try and tell those authentic stories and not make golf cool through leveraging it and stapling it onto something else, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I think what's really interesting too is because of the nature of like your birthplace of where the brand is at, it is quite literally like foreign to all of us in North America. So visually, when you show up, that is already breaking through the noise of what we're typically seeing in our social feeds. And then on top of that, when I go back to like the refinement of sportswear, trying to visually and like from a language standpoint articulate what I'm seeing is a refinement of what's always existed in the performance category. But like you said, the lifestyle category that was growing, being able to converge those two, like in my opinion, there wasn't anybody doing that. And then when you broke through with the product line, especially with the Frontier collection, which I want to talk about, was like the perfect timing and the perfect collection for what didn't exist specifically in North America. And then with that, like the other thing that I've always really appreciated was from collection to collection, everything is very universal. So you could buy something from the Frontier Collection V1 and not get anything until the Frontier Collection V4. And just because of the palettes, the cuts, um, all of that seemed like it was hyper connected and very universally worn from like a style standpoint. Whereas I think what you're seeing in the industry too today is everything is very like segregated. So you get something from a volume or a collection last week, a month later, like that stuff is so distant from collection to collection. It doesn't feel like um, it doesn't feel wearable from collection to collection. Is that something that you guys intentionally have done over the last year and a half, 2 years?
Totally, but also we can't take all the credit because it is you do it out of necessity because the kind of when we changed factories and started working with more kind of performance based factories, the units got so much higher that we could never sell out of a collection like Malbon does within a week. Like our
Mm,
models set up for that, and so if we were going to invest in a pair of waterproofs or our Gales windbreaker, like these are top of the range, like really high functioning products, and they were expensive to make, they're expensive to market, so it would be great if we could have sold out, but we knew when we were planning follow up collections, it's like we need to keep integrating what our best sellers are, but
mm,
also not just to sell more, but just because we're going to have units still. So it started out of that, but now whenever we're thinking of designing a new collection, we have this thing just called complete the look. I feel like
mm.
it's quite exciting, but the average order from Manors, units per transaction, is 2 items. So like most people, normally it's like 1.2 for brands if you're lucky. Anything above one
Yep.
is great. However, ours is like 2.2 or something. So people are buying looks. And so we every time we design a collection, we're always thinking of, okay, well, we know the greenskeepers bang. So if we're going to do a new color of those, how would we dress it in the lookbook? How are we going to pair this with what our best sellers are already so it keeps feeding back in? Because a new
Hmm.
collection budgets to just do an entirely new collection. So a new collection for us is a combination of taking what's worked from previous collections, new colors, new styles, maybe new materials, and then
Hmm.
introducing some newness. But it's yeah, we're not trying to make these collections where it's very specific and unique and they're there to sell out and you never see them again. Like
Hmm.
our a big part of our rebrand was reacting against that and the fast fashion of like, if we develop a new product, we want to be able to enjoy that and sell that and build on that narrative.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of pressure to try and go towards that drop model, and there's a lot of bonus to it. Like the newness is fantastic, but when you spend as much time as we do in developing these and testing them on the course and then shooting these elaborate campaigns around the products, I don't think any of us could bear it if they were done in 2-3 months and we never saw them again.
Well, and your cycles are generally about 180 days, I noticed, at least from the first four Frontier collections. Are you seeing that 2.2 average order value from pieces per transaction across different collections, or is it specific to some of these new drops that come out?
So it's across all collections. So it's weird because Frontier Volume 4, for instance, contains some Volume 1 stuff, some Volume
Yep.
2, and it's never actually been from a just ecom experience a clear division of here's the collection. Like the Frontier collection, and part of the reason we didn't change the name was because of that reasoning, because we were just like, we still have stuff to sell, one, and two, we really like these things, so but we want to introduce newness. So it was born out of necessity of still having product and wanting to continue working with those silhouettes. But the we are starting to change. So we used to be so tied to wholesale for us to put in a big production order. We didn't have the capital, or I would say the confidence, to just go, we'll sell this purely on our channels. So being able to go, here are some select retailers that are going to buy into this before we've even committed how many we're going to make, de-risk it, and then we can take risks in some of the more kind of bold or daring items. So we're less tied to a wholesale model now. We still use it, we still do it, but now from this year and next year, you'll see our campaigns even start to increase and more collections. But it's finding the balance, because we never really want to release a collection which is just the product drops and then you're on to the next thing a week, 2 weeks later. Like we try and align our campaigns so that there's clothing, that there's a community element if possible, there's content, but the content is not just what you see on Instagram, but it's like what's going on in YouTube long form, what's going on in LinkedIn, what's going on on Shorts and TikTok, everything down to even like the signature chain on our emails. Like we try and pack our campaigns on
Mm.
as many different channels as possible, and so doing that takes a lot of time and takes a lot of work. So we want to increase from 2 a year, but we're treading carefully at how quickly to increase that.
Yeah, and I think like there is a level of familiarity too, because word of mouth is super powerful. Like regardless of all the other like digital engines that we have access to now, like at the end of the day, people still care about reviews. And if your product has the opportunity to live and breathe in the space, like you had mentioned at the top, where performance is still a factor, like how does our apparel actually play and work within the world of golf? Like people, if they love it, they want to talk about it. So if you allow the space and time for people to actually like wear the clothing and show their appreciation from collection to collection, like you said, complete the look, people are coming back anticipating what's next based off of what they have now. And then as they share those different stories, people that are new to the brand are showing up, and it's familiar because it's what they've heard or saw in the space. Like you said, it's you're not quickly moving through things. Um,
Yeah.
that's
I
something
mean,
that I've always really appreciated.
and to be honest, it shows in the data. Like when we release a new collection, our returning customer rate, like the vast majority of people that order in that first 1-2 week window are people that have already shopped with us.
Hmm.
Whereas in between campaigns, it's typically favored towards new customers. And I think as a brand, we do more, not more in terms of, let's say, quality, but I would say you're hard pushed to find a brand that's putting out more content and showing up more than us. Like the amount of volume that we put out is pretty immense and exhausting. However, we always say internally in our marketing and content team, it's like the best marketing you can have for a brand is conversion, because if someone buys it and likes the product, what they say to a friend that they're playing with on a weekend is so much more valuable than any piece of content that we can do. Like that trust and authenticity from just like from someone who's bought and loves the stuff. So it is slower and it's not as exciting, but that's kind of out of everything we do. That's always the most paramount thing of like when someone gets the product, please tell me they love it and they love it enough to evangelize about it. And they're not just going to, you know, they're not just going to say which brand they got it from, but why they like that brand. And because I think
Hmm.
so often it's so competitive in the golf clothing space that you see it's very difficult to have an original product. Even if you
Yep.
have an original product, another brand can very easily create something that's very like it, and then a year later you lose that space. So your point of difference, it can be in product, but it's very hard to own that. Whereas if you can own the feeling or the, if your brand positioning can be a mentality or a feeling, that's way more ownable. And then so it doesn't actually matter so much of how original your products are, or how functional they are. When people think of your brand, when they think of that logo, they're thinking, oh, Manors is this brand that makes me feel like this.
Hmm.
What we're trying to build.
Which is arguably probably the hardest thing to do, and I think that is your guys' greatest breakthrough. And again, I think that the timing of it was really special. It all bubbled up just at the right time. And as you guys have grown, going back to your point about feedback, like what has the feedback been internally and externally from consumers in terms of product?
Because we're so close to it, you're always like overwhelmingly good. I would say from the moment we did the rebrand, it's been fantastic. Pre-rebrand, when we were in the kind of classic collection, because we were always struggling to get on our critical path, the timeline it takes. When we started, we didn't really have enough time to make that first collection, and we spent genuinely 3 years trying to catch up to the 16 to 18 month critical path
Mm.
that when you're creating new products from scratch, you kind of need. Um, so the feedback's been brilliant. Um, I would say the most valuable thing for us has been, um, we have kind of like a dozen ambassadors that wear our stuff, and all of these people, none of them are professional golfers, but they're golf content creators. They're wearing the golf clothes the whole time, and like one of them in particular, Josh Park, like when they have feedback, they can be so granular, that if you asked us now, out of our whole product offering, how many products we wouldn't change one bit, there'd probably be only be
Mhm.
one items. So I think we're still very much in a mindset of, if we want to be the most functional brand in golf, it's hard to just sit on a pedestal and be happy. So
Yep.
I think our product offering is great, but yeah, we're constantly looking to improve, and it's amazing how much detail you can get into of whether that is a cut line or the depth of a pocket, or is this material right for these conditions, and so yeah, it goes on and on. My co-founder Nikki, who's our head of product, and we have an in-house product developer called Jess, both of whom are fantastic, and are constantly asking these questions.
When you guys went through the rebrand, you brought up North Face, but your vision board for brand and product, was that different? Was it a convergence of like a couple of things that you had saw or ideas that you had originally had?
it was more. I mean, the storytelling idea was, you know, there are others. For me, golf is like the greatest game just before you've even swung a club, just because of the arenas you play in. Like
Mm,
you're surrounded by some of the most amazing locations, and so I was thinking of other sports like snowboarding or surfing or mountain climbing, where it's like these outdoor sports, performance is obviously an element of them, but so much of it is around, the adventure or taking part or the places it takes you. And so that was the jumping off point. So naturally brands like Arc'teryx and North Face came up. And we were thinking, okay, so what are brands that are functional first? But the challenge for us was, how do we wrap this in a container that doesn't feel like it's just pushing performance? Because it's
yep.
difficult when your product line is essentially, we're a performance brand and it's made to perform on the golf course, and we think endlessly around how we can, improve our products so they perform better. But just by the nature of where we're marketing and the landscape of where the other brands are at, it's very difficult to be compelling when you're just talking about performance, because
Yep.
ultimately that's how everyone else speaks. And especially in a social first landscape, if you're trying to sell your products, you've already lost. Like that's not for us to do. Um, and so we're always kind of playing with to get the balance right, because we have so many benefits and features that we feel like we would want to talk about. We're about to release a waterproof, which we've been developing for 2 years, and I'm so excited this to get on the market, and we're thinking about the campaign for it. And it's like, well, do we go into the features? Do we go into the benefits because we feel these could be the best waterproofs on the market, or do we forget all that and again go back into brand? And so they were developed together. But yeah, we don't really think that much internally around communicating the functionality of a product. It's all brand first, and product is an element of that.
Which I think is really powerful now, especially as a challenger brand that's coming up. Like, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, the hardest thing to uh, do from a consumer standpoint is capture somebody's like emotion. You want them to feel a certain way, and that doesn't come through talking about features and benefits. Like that's already exhausted in the industry. Something that I think you guys also do really, really well, one of the best in the industry, even outside of golf, is your e-commerce platform. Like you in a way make all of your information super digestible beyond just like visually how you show up on an e-com platform, something that is not like the sexiest thing to talk about, but because you're a challenger brand that's smaller and people don't have the opportunity to touch and feel product, the way that you guys show up digitally is so impressive. So that's something, again, as the brand guy in me, I'm always constantly using like your guys's brand, both just how you show up in social, but again, from an e-commerce standpoint, it's just like a guideline for how to do things the right way when you want to challenge the industry.
And it's really difficult knowing that, because I think the general mentality of everyone at the brand is like, retail done right is storytelling. And so
Yep.
we're all focusing on, where's the story? How can we communicate this? However, there are times where it's like, let the conversion do its thing. And on the website, we've redesigned the website so many times. We have a great web developer that we work with, but so often the journey of that has been simplified, cleaner. Don't get in the way. Like if someone's on your website, you've already convinced them of the story. We don't do much
Hmm.
paid marketing, so people aren't really coming to our website cold. So once we've got them there, we don't actually need to tell the story that much. And so it's just knowing which platform is there for what. And I think our website, I think the thing I really like about it now is just it feels very simple and clean, and it allows you to shop looks instead of just products.
Hmm. No, I love that. And again, like visually, it's very attracting. It's easy on the eyes, and I think the way that you guys style things also makes it easy for consumers, especially like most males, I would say majority are getting more into how to dress up, how to dress down, just the idea of what it is to style themselves and how you guys show up visually helps cut out a lot of like the distraction and the confusion. And again, I think that that goes back to like why you're seeing 2.2 items is because a lot of it is universal. They can pick and choose based off of what they're visually seeing on ecom, and then obviously just how many people have worn the brand. It's really easy for them to pick and choose, cherry pick what they want to put together. The other thing that I stumbled across was, I wanna say it was, like, your Pinterest boards and just, like, some, like, visual boards that you had for both product and brand stuff, and I saw that there was, like, a mixture of some old school sportswear brands, some new stuff that's happening in the industry. Like, where do you think, from your perspective, most of your, how do I say it, like, I guess inspiration come from it? Is it through digital, or is a lot of the stuff, physical too, just knowing that you are super involved with product?
God, it's such a wide variety. I think the like you, I'm a big mood board guy, so I'll we have mood boards for everything, and I think there are some amazing references within the kind of archive of golf fashion. So like, but I think they're kind of mostly played out by now. Like a lot of those, you know, the Tiger fits from the early 2000s, the stuff that we were originally doing with the cardigans and the pleated pants, and like a lot of those golf archive touch points have been recreated in a way, and I love them. I think, you know, half our product line is taking inspiration from archive golf clothing, but um our view is like most golfers, at least the golfers in our audience, like that they're, you know, golfer is a core part of their identity, but they're also golfers that, you know, can be football fans and basketball fans, and like it's not so narrow that you're just trying to be a professional golfer. And so we take a lot of inspiration from other sports. So like, you know, our we have our Ranger golf tracksuit, which for us was kind of based on these like 90s Italian warm up tracksuits that Kappa used to do. And we've had like our shooter shirt, for instance, with the Manors branding on the back. Like the first reference for that was I think a Chicago Bulls warm up jersey.
Oh, I love that.
So it's like the amount, I would say, in our product meetings when we're doing references, um, you know, the references will come from archive tennis, archive football, basketball, NFL, and then mixed in with that, my co-founder Nikki, who is the most stylish man I've ever met. He goes to Tokyo, probably Tokyo or Seoul once a year, and we'll just go on these. The last time I was there with him, we just did like a little shopping trip, and he will pull out references just from. He'll be in some back end vintage shop, and he'll pull out a reference for maybe it's a material or a style of pocket or something. So references get pulled from everywhere. The inspo is
Mm,
so wide, and then especially from me, from having a kind of a more filmic background, there's also a lot of, you know, there's a lot of influence from old cinema, like the especially in our classic collection era. So much of it was based on like Al Pacino and The Godfather and the kind of trousers and open collars that they used to wear in that. So it can come from everywhere.
mhm. Where's been, like, the most unique or interesting place where you're like, "Oh, shoot, this would make a really great reference for either brand or product?"
For product, I think me and Nikki were we did a day of just like, for those who haven't been to Seoul, Seoul has some of the best vintage shopping like you could possibly find anywhere. And me and my two co-founders were out there, Nikki and Jojo. Jojo's not a big shopper, so he left me and Nikki to it. And we were in this old kind of Americana style vintage shop where we found the inspo piece for the greenskeepers,
Mm,
and they had some of the same pocket lines, but it was kind of like a cargo trouser.
mm,
Um, and we'd been looking for like, okay, what is the trouser that is kind of cool in other spaces, but just like no one's ever thought to make a golf version of them. And
yep.
so we were looking through it, and Nikki just came out holding these trousers, and both of us, that's it. That's it. So that was the base of that. Um, and then from a content perspective, I mean, our last campaign, a big part of it was inspired by Forrest Gump, like that
Mm,
road going down Arizona. So it can kind of come from anywhere. I think what's been nice around the change of direction we've taken with our campaigns and the way we market collections now is, when we were Frontier Collection, it was actually quite limited on what we could do storytelling wise, because you know, they all had to be connected, and the location and place was a big influence, but there wasn't really any narrative ground to build on, because the collection title, like, Drive to Nowhere, it gives you so much room to play in. And so we're kind of stepping away from the volume 1, 2 collection, whatever it is, and trying to find ways that we can create stories around collections that isn't just based on the location, but also maybe it's a feeling, or it's a set, or whatever it is, but just giving us more room to be a bit more creative with how we tell stories.
That makes sense. Was there anything from the original Manors brand from a product standpoint that made its way into the new Manors brand?
A lot of it, a lot of the polo bases and trousers, it was just the materials. So like the
Yeah.
cut lines, like we're a big fan of, double pleats, and um, it was we have slightly oversized collars in a lot of our polos. So a lot of it came through, but it was more when we were designing products before. One, it was due to a lack of experience and time, that they just didn't perform. They weren't tested for long enough, weren't well enough.
Mm.
But a lot of those cuts, like, we're often trying to find a vintage garment that we really like the silhouette of, but then make it functional for golf.
Yep.
So yeah, there's been quite a lot of parallels. And to be honest, our first ever brand Bible that I made for the Manors, the first original Manors, there's a lot of similarity, and like we even had us creating a sport collection that felt much more like this. It just, in our naive minds, it was much easier to have depth in different styles of collections. And then you realize, like, when someone recognizes your brand, you really have a sentence that you can attach them to. And to be able to try and take the Adidas route, where you have Adidas originals, and,
Yep.
there was way too much. And so we were like, we had to pivot.
How did you land on the color palette in the adjustment phase?
Like you said, with our courses, like, there is, I think that the tendency within golf was that brands would try and attract new people with just these ridiculously vibrant colors and prints and
Yep.
patterns. And so, without naming any names, we knew we didn't want to be in that world. And there's something just so beautiful around the courses that we get to play in the UK, whether it's like the Parkland courses in England, or the links courses in Scotland, where it's you have this like brown rock, and then in Ireland with the amazing tunes, like just the colors that naturally you find on the golf course were so cool to us. And we were also like, every time we shot a campaign, it doesn't really matter what colors the clothing is, it's always going to be complemented with the background of where we're shooting. So we brought the color palette in before we had any idea of what we were doing in the product. We were like, we know when we shoot these campaigns, these are the hues that we're going to already have. So whatever we're doing, to complement that, rather than let's have a very, very vibrant, flowery, poppy polo and then look for a location to match. So it was totally inspired by, our palette is made up of like the skies, the rocks, the sands, the grasses. But to be fair, although I love our color palette, we are trying to, we just released that gorse yellow. We're trying to find ways to bring inspiration without it kind of upsetting the apple cart too much, but giving ourselves a little bit more range.
Yeah, that shot was so insane. I'm glad you brought that up, because I did notice in the Nowhere collection that it was a shorter cycle. Was that intentional? And then I think also introducing new colors. Like, what does, like, how does that? What are those conversations like in terms of like what gets the green thumb from everybody?
Just on the length, this year we're ramping up how many collections and campaign moments we have. So typically it used to be 2 a year, and this year we've gone to 4. So there's a spring, summer, autumn, and a winter, and maybe a collaboration actually in there as well. And it's just so noticeable, us both from a sales perspective, but also just from the stats on social media. When we release a new campaign, after about 2 weeks, the content gets tired, the revenue starts to dip. So it's very obvious why other brands do have this drop model, and they're trying to create newness the whole time. But we're trying to again find a middle ground where we can have that newness, but we still get the impact of having a campaign moment that has all these different layers that engage the community and content and clothing. And so we're trying to introduce more, but still it's making sure each campaign gets its moment.
I think you hit the sweet spot, especially with just like color injections. Like it's still very familiarity. It goes back to like that notion, but then when you drop a new color and it has like a very interesting visual component too, like people are just they're hyped for it. And again, it's just it feels like a shot in the arm to your point. Like it's just new energy, but it's something that still exists that people still enjoy. But it just carries you through the year from drop to drop.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that stuck out too in those Pinterest boards was the patterns. And I think like this last collection, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the
Try
repeater
to,
that you guys had, the granite polo in that blue
yeah.
colorway.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely killer piece. Again, that's just something that I think from a pattern standpoint, especially in the States, like we get just the craziest stuff that doesn't make any sense from a golf perspective, both just like visually and like what's appealing. But talk to me through like the introduction of patterns and what those conversations are like.
I mean, they're very long and combative. I think we're all on the same page that we want to have more graphic repeaters and patterns. Like, what's weird is most golf brands. Um, this is in fact this is assumption from my part, but that you would think polos are going to be the biggest turnovers for golf brands, and just the same classic polo, but with different prints and different colors and different repeaters. And traditionally, menswear brands, especially trousers, sell the worst. And
Mm.
for us, it's our trousers do really well, our mid layers and outers do really well, but the polos, they tend to not be our best sellers. And so it feels like surely that's the easier bit. And with the prints and repeaters, like I love it when we introduce them, but when we're doing it, we're so determined not to go down the kind of cocktail drinks or flowers. I think there are a lot of stereotypes with what a golf print looks like.
Yep.
And I think what's been difficult with us is because we're so storytelling focused, we don't want to commit to a repeater print or style before we really know what the collection is about. And the time after that are difficult because, we started working on the Drive to Nowhere collection 18 months ago, and we had no idea we're going to shoot it in Arizona and what those prints and patterns are going to be. So you have to be a little bit broader and more abstract with it, and have a really deep understanding of your visual language and what are the different things that inspired you. So that it's getting easier to do, but for us, it was always quite tough on how do we pick a print or repeater when we don't know what this campaign is going to be about? What's the story we're telling? But we're getting closer at lining it up. And this year, especially, we have some amazing prints and repeaters that are coming.
I love that. Yeah, to me, when I first saw it, it felt like a extension of the logo. I think selfishly, like I would love to know what was in the net for when you went through the rebrand, what other logos that you guys were looking at. We don't have to talk about that specifically, but that's always something because I've done a bunch of rebrands where you're sitting on a board of marks, and as a group, you're trying to determine what direction you're going to head into for the next 10, 15, 20, 100 years or whatever. That's such an interesting look back conversation.
Well, look, I nearly picked the other logo. We narrowed it down to two, and I
Really?
remember we were working with this incredible design studio called Stink
Mm.
Studios. They have a London office, but I mean, these guys were so much. I think they were designing the branding for the visual identity for the LA Olympics at the same time, and
I
they've just
think
done like
that's the
uh,
Behance board I saw was that
exactly.
company.
So they are huge. And when we did the rebrand, I think luckily one of their creative directors or lead designers was a big golf fan. And I think
Mm.
projects for them last so long that I put this really in-depth kind of brief together, which was more of like a brand Bible for the new Manors, with a story explaining why we need to change and with all the visual references. And it luckily enough sparked some excitement in the creative director there. And so they committed to do it, and we had this incredible process of them listening to us and then providing all these different options and directions and making sure that the story was laid into the framework of what they were creating. And we basically got to a space where we had two logos. We had one which, honestly, it was probably like, imagine like a Tesla logo but an M. But like 3-4 years ago, like there was that slab kind of M, and then there was this logo here, this
Mhm.
emblem. And I remember thinking, I was very close to picking the other one because it felt, this logo mark for me is very original, and original sometimes isn't necessarily just good. Like it's
Yep.
unusual. Like the first time we saw it, a few reactions we got were like, that's just, it's not like anything else. Um, and so at first, I think we were slightly scared about that. And then, to be fair, I went for a drink with my girlfriend, and she looked at them, and I said, I think I'm going to go with this one. And she was like, "You're mad! You're mad! That just looks like a bad Tesla logo. That logo is incredible." So she kind of swung it for me, and then from then on, I think we all absolutely love it now. And it's both original. We call it the emblem, that thing you're wearing there, because it kind of looks like
Mhm.
an M, but it's made up of the 18 holes. It feels somewhat like it's mirroring the kind of journey that you take on a golf course, going right to left. And there's yeah, we love it, and they did an amazing job.
I think I said it was the logo that dances a while back, just because again, it's super memorable. Marks are really important as a part of like just the brand ethos and the storytelling part. Um, the something that I asked on social that was really interesting, and I got a lot of interesting feedback was we all know like what a great golf brand or brand in general looks like, but what does like a great golf brand or brand in general feel like? And the amount of comments, the engagement was really great to see because I think it's one of those questions that we often forget to talk about, but consumers heavily lean on. Just knowing that you're in the sportswear category and there's a lot of testing that needs to take place from a functionality standpoint, and then also just like what does the brand feel like? Like what are those conversations like in terms of like the feedback loops that you're getting from the ambassadors and then your internal team too, from a direction of just like texture and material?
I mean, to be honest, I feel we've actually gone more. We've been too tightly. Our collection, the materials have been slightly too synthetic and performance based. I feel like we've been trying to reintroduce, you know, linens and knitwear and just not make it too performance. The problem is, it's you always want the function to be first, so you always want to have the right materials for the products you're doing. However, what I love is when you complete a look and you're layering different pieces with totally different materials on top. That's when you start to get a real banging look. However, again, just I think people forget how expensive it is to manufacture clothes at the kind of quality that we're doing it. And it just means you, as much as we would love to introduce 5, 6 new materials on a collection, when we introduce a new material, we have to love it because we know it's going to have to go across 3 or 4 different SKUs. So we're very excited to be releasing some new materials this collection and later this year. But for me, it's not so much in actually the touch and feel in the product, but it's the trimmings for me that take it to the level above, and that can
Mm,
be, you know, the buttons on a pocket. It can be the branded zips you have on a puller. Like, I think as long as you're not just working with crap cheap materials, so many brands, so many performance brands, their products feel quite similar to me. But when you start looking at the details of
yep.
where are the cut lines, what are the trimmings that they're using, what's the stitching on the inside of the product look like, that's when it starts to really take it up a notch for me.
No, I totally agree. And I think, again, because of how strong you guys show up visually, the last thing that you want from a product standpoint is it to feel like a template. And so all those little finishing details, that to me completes the story in terms of how the brand shows up and then the product that consumers are actually purchasing. Like they're getting a one-to-one experiences, which is amazing. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is just collabs. I think in between a lot of your collections towards the back half of last year you started introducing some really tasteful collabs. One of them being one that I always really appreciated was the connection with Jones. What is your guys' thought process on just like what's happening in the industry on a collab nature, and then the way that you guys approach collabs for the Manors brand?
I love collaborations, and I think when they're done well, it's so exciting. I would say the tendency, or I would say the fear that we've had internally is like, if a collaboration just feels like a cash grab, or it just feels like it's a kind of lazy logo lockup slaps together, and there isn't a real story of why are these two brands working with each other, what kind of synergy do they bring coming together, and then what's the story that they're telling, who's it for, like what's the identity of this collaboration. So we probably go too far and have said no to quite a few opportunities just because we felt it was just going to be a product based thing, where we want to bring in community and content and have a real concept at the heart of it that we're both on the same page for. Though we, it takes for a brand like us, they're amazing because a collaboration, as this, at least for Manners, the purpose is to try and get new people aware of your brand. And so, as much as like we've done a few collaborations with Jones, which is fantastic. However, like if you look at how Palace and Adidas did their collaboration, the Bogey Boys Adidas original collaboration was also incredible. You can create such a big moment that we're excited to do it. I think we will never go to a level where we're doing more than 1-2 a year, even if it's that. But it's an exciting opportunity for us because it's like Manners stands for one thing, and so we're telling those stories. But by just introducing another brand, you've just got all this new narrative ground to be able to develop, both from product and content. So look, I'm a really big fan, and I can't wait to reveal some more of the collaborations that we have coming up. But yeah, it's definitely a labor of love, and I think the amount of work we've put into collaborations over the last 2 years that will never see the light of day. And I think a lot of that comes from us trying to make sure that before we start developing clothes, we know we're aligned with the other brand on what's the positioning of this, what's the concept behind this, of why people are going to buy it now, and why it's us specifically and not just another golf brand that you're working with. And I think sometimes that work for a company that's so much bigger than us can be a little bit overwhelming and just be like, this is too much work for what we're doing.
Yeah, I feel like I can always sense whether or not there was not even necessarily like a 50-50 in terms of like product development around specific like product lines and stuff when it comes to collabs, just like narratives and stuff. Again, it has to come back down to what is like the unique product story we're telling. Like I just had this conversation with Ben Boscovich from like our editor in chief, in the sense of something that would be really interesting is like an Arc'teryx and Sentinel. Like that's a really interesting, unique product story collaboration, whereas I would never see them just show up from logo to logo. So there has to have like a really impactful narrative there.
You almost want to be able to go, like, by just saying the two brands' names, there should be a collision where you're like, okay, that creates some tension there. There's something interesting going on there, and you can already picture it. And then for me, the next step is being able to go, okay, there's a natural synergy, and you're already thinking of visuals of when you say these two brands, but then what's the theme or concept that's going to tie this together and actually make it specific, which then makes it a hell of a lot more exciting. But I don't think many brands do it that way around, focusing so much on the story first, and it can definitely complicate things and slow things down. But it's when you do get everyone on the same page, it's very exciting.
100%. I totally agree. Well, cool. Well, the last question that I ask everybody on the way out, call it the style story, but basically you can take a minute to think about this too. The question is, what's the story behind the one item in your closet you'll never get rid of? And then what that item means to you.
Wow. Anyone who knows me is going to laugh. But this hat that I'm wearing is
Yeah.
anywhere without this hat. This hat has been, so basically it's from, look how manky this fucking hat is, but what's the
Oh,
place?
gee.
So it's like when Titleist used to do all their manufacturing in the States, there was like this kind of retro low crown hat, like there was just something so specific about the fit of this that I wanted to recreate. I saw this hat just on eBay, absolutely loved it, sent it to every single factory that we were working with to try and get them to recreate this exact kind of low profile, the fit. Our retro crown cap is based on this same fit. So I absolutely love it. I've worn this hat in so many inappropriate places, whether it's like a Berlin or a round of golf or a wedding reception. So my girlfriend absolutely hates it. I'm convinced it's the greatest hat that's ever been made. And yeah, it probably will get destroyed pretty soon. It doesn't have much legs left, and it kind of smells. So we're looking for a replacement.
Yeah, have you found any potential leads on eBay or anything else for replacement lid?
You can find things. You can find ones that are the same, but I've got a tiny fucking pinhead. So it's like
Same.
this was very small. So it's like most hats don't really fit me. So it's this specific fit, but also I can't remember the exact size of it, but there's not many of these going left around in existence. And actually, I'm friends with all of the guys who are selling kind of vintage hats on Instagram and constantly trying to seed them in. Like, if this comes in, like, you name your price, I'm there.
Howlin' One, that's the guy. I don't know where he finds his stuff, but that dude's always got some gems out there. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, great, man. I'm so pumped we were able to sit down and talk. I can't wait for the day that we actually get to link up and play some golf. I've been looking forward to that for a minute. But is there anything you want to shout out on your way out, anywhere that we can find you specifically, and then stuff that we should be paying attention to for the Manors brand?
I mean, you can find me at Luke Davies 56, but I don't really post much. So if you don't follow Manors, just make sure you're following Manors. Shout out. Well, look, we do have some exciting news coming up in this quarter. We've got our first global collaboration, which I'm super excited about. And to be honest, my shout out would kind of be to you. I know I said it at the beginning of the call, but I don't think people realize when you're a young brand, you don't have big marketing budget. You rely so much on word of mouth. And I think the first time where you did a video on us, we put it on our Slack channel, and it does so much more than I think you can ever know when someone does something like that and really goes out for you and puts a lot of effort into explaining all the things that you would love to say about yourself, but you can't, like someone else has to do that. So yeah, big up Raymond, big up Golf Projects.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm an absolute nerd when it comes to brands. So I think when people are doing things the right way and are constant an example in the industry, whether it's specific to golf or outside of it, that I always reference, I have to show you guys love in that regards. But you guys make it extremely easy for me to do so.
I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you.
Nice one, Raymond. I'll see you later, mate.
All right, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you're feeling the vibe, hit that subscribe button and drop us a quick review. It helps us keep the conversation going and growing. For more golf fashion, follow us over at Skratch and Golf Projects. We're always serving up style and stories that make this game what it is. And if you're hungry for even more, head over to Skratch.golf, where our collective stories live. Until next time, dress well and play fast. Peace.